I'll fight anybody that says Isaiah Thomas isn't the best point guard in NBA history. And I'm going to tell you why before I talk to Isaiah. Nobody, and you got to understand, I studied these guys. I wasn't as good as these guys, but whether it's Barkley or Jordan or Isaiah or all these guys, I studied them. And I got to tell you, nobody went through Bird, Magic, and Jordan other than Isaiah twice to win NBA titles. And I want you to think about that just for a second. Nobody did that. And I say nobody. Nobody won like Isaiah won. Isaiah nice enough to join us. I got to tell you, I look at the world today and I say to myself, all right, a lot of great players, but nobody did what you did. Back then, nobody did what you did. So there you go. I say you're the best to ever play at the point guard position.
Well, thank you. And I say you are the best defender that's ever defended Michael Jordan.
Yeah, okay. And, yeah, all right.
And no, really.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, in the tournament, what'd you hold him to? 4 points, 6 points?
Well, he got 9 off me. Let's put it that way. He ended up with 11.
He got 9.
He got 9
okay,
off
well,
me.
He didn't get to double digits.
No,
but it was
no. Hell no.
It was and when you talk about winning, and thank you for the compliment in terms of beating those guys. They all had great size and they could jump higher than I could. But what we learned at Indiana, playing for Coach Knight, and in high school, playing for Mr. Pingator, my high school coach, you find ways to force players to do the things that they don't want to do and they're not good at. And you go out on the court, and Coach Knight would always send us out on the court, and we felt great about our game plan. And he made us feel confident about who we were guarding and how we should defend them. And he would say, if you let him do X, Y, and Z, you're going to have a hard night. But if you force him to do A, B, and C, then we'll win the game. And so it eliminated all of the genetic gifts that bigger, stronger, more athletic players brought to the game. And it gave you a way to go out and really compete against guys who were more physical, bigger than you, and jumped higher than you. And I took that into the NBA.
I'm going to give you all that, but you had an unbelievable toughness about you. Or have. I shouldn't say had. I mean, 28 points on an ankle the size of my size 8 head, pissing everybody off because you didn't back down from everybody. Somebody said this. I think it was Barkley came on my show last week, and he said about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving has all of Isaiah's gifts, but he doesn't have Isaiah's absolute killer in him. And I don't think he meant that as a criticism of Kyrie Irving. He meant it more as a compliment of you. Where'd you get that? Where'd you get to be a stone cold killer from?
I think just growing up on the west side of Chicago, I literally had to fight almost every day, going to school and coming back from school. So and I didn't win all my fights, but the most important thing is that you learned how to fight. And then you figured out, like, okay, sometimes if you fight hard enough, the other guy just may give up because he doesn't want to fight anymore. Right. So I always brought, that type of competitive energy to the game, and to the sport. And I try to incorporate that into my game. And it's no different than playing football, right? You talk to some of the football players and they're the nicest guy off the field, but when they get on the field, their job is to hit you and to lay pain. But there's a certain mentality that you bring to the game that you make your opponent feel it. And I thought Coach Knight coached us that way too. It was like, you have to compete, and you have to be tough enough to compete. And some people don't want to compete.
I got to go to something else Barkley said. Barkley said, hey, man, he said, the funniest thing I ever saw, it was a reporter asking Michael Jordan, did he keep Isaiah off the Olympic team? And Jordan said no. and the reporter literally played Michael Jordan's quote that I won't play on the. And Barkley said it was the funniest damn thing. Why did that all happen, Isiah? Why, in your mind, looking back, did that all happen? What was Jordan's beef?
I really don't know. I and I'm and still today, Barkley and I think all of us are just finding out how much, Jordan really lied about, the whole Olympic situation and the Dream Team situation. And for a lot of years, he hid behind trees throwing stones and he let others take the blame. Um, my family and my nephew like lived with Jordan for like 5, 6 years in Chicago, and we always had, a good relationship. And even when I was working at NBC, if you go back and you listen to any of the broadcasts, I was very complimentary of him. Coached him in his last All-Star game. I even made Vince Carter, or I didn't make him, but I strongly suggested to him that he should give up last starting his starting position so Michael Jordan could start in his last All-Star game. And I coached that team in Atlanta. So when the Last Dance came out, and we all saw, we got a peek behind the scenes, and we saw the type of personality he truly had, and also the way he treated Jerry Krause and everyone else. And then you finally heard the tape. That's when everything really came out, that he basically said he didn't want to be on the team if I was on the team, which I didn't know I scared him that much. So there we are.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Like, I get it. Like, okay, you and Magic were friends, and you're in the finals, and you're going to battle like crazy. You and Jordan are competing, you're going to battle like crazy. But that whole Last Dance thing, I know Jordan got praised for it, but I felt like he was a petty punk. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but that's what I felt relative to you and Krause. And that's how I felt, Isiah. I just felt like he was a petty, small person for the way he treated you. Not that he, and I also felt like, okay, he wouldn't do that to your face. Like, we're showing a picture right now of you and Jordan face to face. I don't think you'd do that to your face, but as you said, hide behind trees. I thought it was petty and punkish. Let's put it that way.
Well, the Last Dance, the way it it portrayed him, you know, I I I think all of us, we never really had a chance to, like you say, peek behind the curtain and see what he really was like as a person, and the way he not only treated me, but the disrespect that they had for Jerry Krause, the president and the general manager of the team. Um, I cringed watching how he was being treated and talked to. And still today, his wife gets introduced at the Chicago Bulls ceremony, and the fans and everyone boo her because of the way they followed Jordan and the mythology of him all these years. So um, I him as a person and the way he's treated people over the years, and I would say the way people have kind of let him have his way, um, is kind of been distasteful to kind of watch over the years, to hear him character assassinate other people, but you know people have accepted his bad behavior and character for a long time only because he won basketball games.
I would argue that they've hid his bad behavior for a long time, as much as anything. How different is, I say this all the time, and this is not a criticism of Steph Curry. I say this all the time about you. When you went down the lane, you had to make a business decision, and Karl Malone almost killed you. In fact, I was talking about it on my indie show the other day, and a lot of people were YouTubing it going, holy hell, right? I mean, he almost killed you. Now, that game is not played that way, and maybe rightfully so, maybe not. Okay, how has the game changed in your mind for a point guard in terms of the physicality, in terms of business decisions going to the rim?
Night and day. Um, you Karl Malone hit me like that. I got hit like that by Bill Cartwright. Uh, I don't think there's a player in my era that got hit harder or got beat up going to the rim more than I did. Jordan cried and said he did, but it wasn't him. Um, I think with Curry and I'll go to the marketing aspect and the rule changes of the game. Back in our day, the big man ruled the lane. In the NBA, really marketed, and all the rules favored the bigger player. The offenses were designed for the bigger player to throw it inside. I'll keep going back to Coach Knight because Dan, you and I played for him, and he was the only one or the only coach during that period of time that was saying, no, we don't play with post up players. We're going to move past screen and, take good jump shots, layups, so forth and so on. But very rarely did you throw it in the post and stand around and wait for people to score. But that's how the game was played, and that's how offenses were ran at that time. So small players, such as myself, uh, and the way I played was very different. And driving to the basket, there was a price to pay. In the NBA marketed the dunk. It was about how tall you were, how athletic you were, and how high could you jump. Now, what's being marketed today is the jump shot. Can you shoot from the 3-point line, and how great and how cool it is to shoot it from the three and not necessarily dunk. And I remember, and you can remember this, Dan. Like, it used to be every night you would watch, the sports channel. They led off with somebody throwing down a thunderous dunk, and everybody couldn't jump that high. And then now, as we progressed and the game has evolved or changed, I just say the game has changed. What's being marketed now is the jump shot. And a guy can go to the basket and do a 360 windmill, and everyone would say, "Oh, that's nice." But if you step across half court and you let it go from the three, everybody goes crazy in the gym.
Yeah, that's right. That's, yeah, I always said, guys that asked me, would Coach Knight let you do that? I said, yeah, if you're Isaiah and you could make them, but
Or
not
Steve Alford.
me and miss them, or Alford or Cheney or
Yeah.
someone like that. And Woody, you make them. Speaking of that, what is your thoughts on this whole Caitlin Clark thing and where women's basketball's at?
I actually love the attention that Caitlin has brought to the WNBA, and I love the attention that women's basketball is getting. Uh, for too long, we've kind of the media hasn't really shined the light on the WNBA athletically and competitively. They'll give it a nod every now and then, but now, since Caitlin has arrived and she had a great college career and she was fantastic to watch, and you're curious and you want to see it go on. So I think it's great what she's done, and I think it's great what the media and the WNBA and marketing and the players are doing, because controversy is not good, but controversy sells. And whether the NBA wants to admit it or not, the NBA, you know, the steps that it made to get to the place that it's at, from a fan appeal standpoint, is that the NBA over the years had to go through some very controversial moments, and they stepped up and they met the challenge. And the WNBA, I think, is in its 26th or 27th year of existence, and it's going to go through those. controversial moments, and I have no doubt that they'll step up and meet the challenge.
Do you think in this day and age, it used to be, hey, talk good about me, talk bad about me, as long as you're talking about me, there's no such thing as bad press. Do you think that still holds true now?
Oh no, there's a such thing as bad press, and bad
I
press
agree.
is not always good press.
Right.
And you don't you don't want people necessarily talking bad about you, but the issues that need to be attacked are, they have to attack them and approach them head on. The NBA, one of the most controversial issues of the NBA when it was growing, in the late '70s, early '80s, and I and Sports Illustrated had on the cover of its magazine, will will black players ever be able to attract a white audience to the NBA to watch his game? And David Stern at that time, he pushed all the chips to the table and said, "Yeah, I think they will." And we met those moments, and the NBA met those moments, and I think the WNBA will meet those moments also. And um, Caitlin, I love the way she's she's handling herself with interviews before and after the game, because a lot of times, while while people want to write and talk, they use her name to really express how they truly feel, as opposed to saying it themselves. And I admire her as a young woman, um, not only taking on the challenge, but also accepting it, embracing it, and letting people have their say, but still, um, what's the word I'm looking for, when you rise above and you stay above the fray. um,
Hmm.
that's kind of what she's doing. And I like that she's doing it that way.
Danny Hurley turned down the Lakers. A lot of people are telling me, well, it's an indictment on LeBron or the NBA. I don't buy any of that. Sometimes things don't fit. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on Hurley not going to the NBA? Coach Knight told me many times that he was going to the NBA, or he was going to the broadcast booth, and I know he said the opposite, but he told me many times that he was going to go. He just couldn't pull the trigger on it. Hurley doesn't go. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he's got a great situation at UConn, and sometimes, you money is not the driver. You and if you truly enjoy coaching, college coaching and coaching in college, you still get to impact a young man's life, before he takes on the next step of entering into adulthood. You catch him, in some of those formative years as a teenager. And from a coaching standpoint, and Hurley being a value-based coach, he doesn't appear to be a friend coach. He has some impact, and I think he enjoys that. Anytime you get a chance to, coach the Lakers or the Celtics, that's a that's a once in a lifetime opportunity that I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody dreams of. But I think he made the right decision staying at UConn, because what he truly enjoys, is, I think, impacting lives. He's created a culture that he talks about, and that culture, I think, can only be established in college or in high school. I don't think you can have that type of culture in the NBA because of the travel, the play, the money, the families, and everything else that comes along with it.
Hey, Isaiah, I don't pretend to know you well, but I played with guys that did, Randy and Ted and those guys, and they always talked about, among other things, how you turned down a lot of money to go to a lot of different places to come to Indiana. But let's move it forward. You're coming out of high school. You see what guys are being. How much would you have been worth? What would they have had to pay? Not that they you. What would your market value have been right now coming out? Pan American champion, the best point guard in the country, the whole thing. What 3 mil coming out of high school?
That would be the starting point that my brothers would be asking. And then and
Right.
let me
Right.
correct this. Let me correct this story, Dan. I wanted the money. My mom was the one who turned down the money. We we were all about, hey mom, look, we ain't got no lights, we ain't got no food in the refrigerator, we walk into school, we want the money. And my mom was like, no, we're going to Indiana and Coach Knight's not going to give you any money. And we did not like her decision. But nowadays, I think with the NIL money and everything else, my brothers would be tough negotiators.
Hey, is it true your one brother wanted to fight Coach Knight, and one of your brothers drove his mail truck down the highway I-65 to come to games?
All facts.
All
My
fact.
my 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 older brother, he's since passed away, and during that time, you know, coming out of high school, and this is something that people don't remember. In the in the 70s, early 80s, in my family, and this would probably shock you when I say this. In my family, I was the first person in my family out of the Jim Crow era. So, you know, coming to Indiana and being away from home, that wasn't that you didn't go too far from your house. And I remember my brother. First of all, let me tell you this: when Coach Knight came to visit me, he walked in with Quinn Buckner and Wayne Embry. So right then and there, he had won the battle with my mom. And my
Okay.
brother, my brother was asking him, about, going to Indiana and everything else. And he and Coach Knight, had some words. And this is when I think my mother really fell in love with Coach Knight. My brother said, hey, well, we can take it outside. And Coach Knight stood up, took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and said, let's go. And and, and everyone was, kind of, arguing, oh no, don't fight, don't fight. And you know how there's that one person in the room who's not saying anything? And that was my mom. I looked over at her and she was shaking her head, and I was like, oh no, she likes him. And 3 days later, my mom had a press conference and said, my son has made his decision. He's going to Indiana University to play for Coach Bob Knight. That was it.
Did you tank interviews so your buddy Aguirre could be the number one pick?
Yeah, you know, again, and by the way, Chicago, I believe that year had the fourth and the sixth pick in the draft, and Mark Aguirre and I both, um, being from the west side of Chicago, growing up, 3, 4 blocks from each other, we wanted to stay home and play for Chicago. So both of us had the idea that if we didn't do well in these interviews, we can drop to 4 and 6 in Chicago, and we can, both play for the Bulls at home and be in Chicago. And so, yeah, we didn't interview well for Dallas or Detroit. And in my interview in Dallas, I remember Dick Motta asking me. He said, "Well, if you had the number one pick, who would you take?" I said, "Oh, you would love Aguirre." So he would be perfect for you. Your offense, you had Chet Walker, Bob Love in Chicago. You run the offense for the forwards. He would work well in your offense. I don't know if I would work so well in your offense. And then I get interviewed in Detroit, and Jack McCloskey is interviewing me. He and Will Robinson. And Jack, said, "Well, how do you think you would fit here in Detroit?" I said, "I don't know if I would fit here in Detroit." McCloskey goes, "Stop right now. If you're at number 2, I'm drafting you, and now you can leave." And that was the interview. We he he didn't ask me no more questions. We had no more talk. He got up and walked out of the room.
He's smart. He wasn't.
Yeah,
He
and the rest
wasn't
was
listening to
history.
your bullshit. He was not
No, he was
handling your
not.
bullshit with that. He was
No, he
not,
was
man.
not.
He was not. And by the way, rest in peace, Chet Walker. I grew up, Northwest Indiana. I wore number 10 until I went to Indiana, and they gave me your number. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, I can't measure up to this. What are you guys, nuts? But Bob Love is my all-time favorite athlete ever. Like, you're a little kid. You're like, how'd the Bulls do last night? How many did Love score? And Chet Walker just passed away at age 84, sadly. Isiah, man, what a blast. Thanks for coming on, man. I kept you too long, but I just having too much fun. Thanks for coming on.
Nah, you can keep me as long as you want, Dan. I'm here for you anytime. You and the family. I love you very much. And by the way, proud of the career that you built, once you took off the uniform at IU, and keep doing your thing, man, and keep telling the truth.
Thanks, my friend. Thank you. Love you too. Thanks, Isiah. Appreciate you very
Okay.
much.
All right.
There he goes. The greatest point guard in the history of basketball, and I'll fight you. And I have fought people over it, which gets ridiculous sometimes. Why am I fighting over people? But I'm just telling you, the greatest point guard, in my opinion, in the history of basketball. That was a lot of fun. Hey, thanks for being here. If you're an OutKick fan, you know we give it to you straight. Here on Don't At Me, we have a ton of fun, more content right here. And while you're at it, sack the hell up and be sure to hit that subscribe button now.